Today on the TMZ Podcast.
Welcome to the TMZ Podcast. Eric and Jaime here. How are you, Jaime?
I'm good. Good morning.
Good morning to you, although we have two pretty serious stories on tap, so we should just jump right in because they're pretty complicated. I want to start with Jonathan Majors. This story has been developing since there was a March 25th incident where he was arrested. And this guy is on the precipice of real superstardom. I must say, he was in Creed 3, he's in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This came out of left field. Around 11 a.m., there was an incident on March 25th where his lawyers are now saying Jonathan was the one who called 911 out of concern for the woman's mental health who he was with. Now, he was the one arrested, so this is a bit of a curveball. I want to read the statement, though. It says, the police arrived with the paramedics as a standard procedure and arrested Mr. Majors due to an NYPD protocol requiring arrest in certain circumstances. On that same day, only 7 and 9 hours later, the woman sent text messages to Mr. Majors admitting that she was the one who used physical force against him. She also disavowed any allegations that he had done anything to her and confirmed that Mr. Majors called 911 because of her mental condition. These are the messages, redacting her name for privacy. Here's where we are. Jonathan Majors is a very sort of successful guy. He's got big, high-powered lawyers, and they're going to work to sort of get rid of this case as quickly as possible because it could really derail his career.
Yeah, I think we need to also help out the audience. If you are not aware of this story at all, what happened was, what the story was before is Jonathan was arrested for domestic violence, and the story was they got in a fight in the back.
It was assault, yeah.
Domestic assault. The story we were given several days ago was there was a fight in the back of the cab. It had to do with a phone, him possibly texting other women. Then there was a laceration to the girlfriend behind her ear, and she had red marks on her face. So that is what originally we had been told. And as Derek just read of the new situation, it's completely different.
Yeah, and look, he has now completely denied these allegations. Oftentimes, you'll get an explanation of what caused this dispute. There was mutual combat. She hit me first. This is an outright denial. He is saying what has been reported to have occurred didn't occur at all, and I'm actually the one who called for the assistance of the cops. This is a 180 from the way the story sort of initially was sort of presented in the media. And, you know, I don't want to sort of comment on the veracity of it, but this is also a story that could be consistent with her being abused and then sort of recanting sort of allegations of abuse. So I don't know. I'm in a little bit of a pickle here, sort of how to process this, because of course he's going to completely deny it. This could have the potential to really upend his career at a critical moment.
I understand what you're saying, that this is very common with domestic disputes, that the woman then changes her story. But you can't change facts. If the story is that he called 911, that's hugely different.
Yes.
And that's not a he said, she said. We check the records, we see who called the police at 11 a.m. And if it is Jonathan Majors, then I don't want to say exonerated, but
it changes the narrative quite a bit. It changes the
narrative completely.
That's right. Look, he could call the cops after also inflicting abuse. That could be part of this narrative. She did have injuries.
You know many stories where an abuser calls on themselves?
No, to be quite honest, I don't.
Yeah.
But I could imagine sort of a confrontation that gets very heated, involves some physical violence, and then to sort of stop the physical violence, you call just to have the assistance of third parties. And then she presented some injuries, so they had to arrest him. I understand those protocols, and this could all go away. This could be a huge misunderstanding, but something went on in that cab, and what I'm still waiting on and what we were told exists is this video from inside. It's either an Uber or a taxi, some sort of shared ride, and you've seen these videos on TikTok, Instagram. People who drive Uber often record the interaction so that they can then have a sort of defense against you did something wrong. They want to have this sort of record. If this exists, I think it'll provide a huge amount of clarification, because right now we just have his words. We haven't really heard directly from her. We've heard what he says he received from her. I'd like to maybe hear from her, although she has her own privacy rights and interests that she may not want to be public. But the narrative is sort of being driven entirely by Jonathan Majors at this point. And I'm just saying that these cases deserve sort of a fulsome investigation. You want to hear from cops, you want to hear from the woman, and you want to hear from Jonathan Majors. And it's good that he is sort of like providing these details, but I just think it feels incomplete at this point. What do you think?
I'm wondering, so clearly his attorney has seen the video from the back of the car because
Sounds like it.
They said something along the lines of, we were very confident after viewing. What are we waiting for then? Why isn't the public seeing this?
That's the thing that is very curious to me, because the text messages are obviously extremely helpful to Jonathan Majors, so they got them out as quickly as possible. Here we go. Here's his full statement, complete denial. Here's a text message of the woman admitting fault. The better piece of evidence, if you have it, is that video, and yet we haven't seen that. Now, maybe there's some clearance issues. Maybe the Uber driver is asking for an exorbitant sum of money. He knows it's helpful to Jonathan Majors or knows it hurts Jonathan Majors. I don't know, but if that video were great, Jonathan Majors clearing his name, you'd think that he would do anything to grab hold of that and release it to the public, because that could really change the complexion of this case. Often those videos are not just surveillance, they're audio, they're everything.
So he was charged with a lot of different things.
Yeah, strangulation.
Yes. So if she is saying still recanting, saying this didn't happen, blah, 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 does this have to go forward? Can this just go away?
It can. So here's the way domestic violence cases usually work. We talk about cases being dropped because the witness is not cooperative. What you need in cases where it's he said, she said often is to have a victim come in and describe the story of what happened to them. You don't need it. If there's enough sort of circumstantial evidence, if there's video evidence, if there are enough sort of witnesses other than the victim, you don't need to have that witness cooperate. But it sure helps. It's really hard to prove a case where you have someone saying, I wasn't abused, what are the cops doing? It just makes the process very difficult to sort of carry through.
But especially if she's saying
back,
that,
it's going to be hard to bring the case.
Well, she has pulled back according to them in these texts that we're looking at. But on top of the fact, if she really wasn't the person to call 911, so she doesn't
have to be.
But I'm saying that's such a different story of he called 911 about her mental health.
Yes.
And then somehow he got arrested in all of this. So I just feel like if she didn't reach out for help and she's now saying, well, I don't need help, then what are we doing?
Sure. But 911 calls are one piece of evidence. I believe the Murdaugh called 911, and made this whole song and dance about finding his wife and son dead, and he's been convicted of double homicide. So it is a piece. It's a piece in his favor, but it's not the entire story.
Sure.
And some people will call even when they've done things that are illegal. So I think her pulling back is going to be a huge part of whether the case goes forward, regardless of how he's perceived in the public. I don't think there's going to be a case against him if she recants all of the allegations. I don't think the prosecutor will go into court with a hostile witness where Jonathan Majors can put her on the stand saying, no, I wasn't hit. What do you do with that? How do you prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he's guilty of anything?
And then more than that, I wonder how forgiving is Hollywood?
That's the separate inquiry. So we have this legal overlay, whether he'll go to jail or spend some time
behind bars. And I don't think so.
Bars.
If I had a crystal ball, I would say, no, it's going to go away. It's going to be fine. I'm more worried about what damage happened. Yeah.
Domestic violence is sticky. It's a very sort of it doesn't really matter the truth of the allegations in all cases. I guess it's just the allegation itself is out there now, and that is sort of casting a shadow over his career, right?
Well, it is.
It's going to give people pause.
Yeah, almost like if this was 2 years in the future when he was more of a household name, more of America's sweetheart. Nowadays, people are a dime a dozen. Let's recast, and I hope that doesn't happen for him. Assuming that this is all false.
I think that's right. Even
I'm just so tired of canceling everyone who really didn't do anything. And if he really didn't do anything, he's so talented.
That would be unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yes. If his career were obliterated by an allegation that has absolutely no basis in truth, it would be unfortunate because he's tremendous. Yeah. He's a very, very talented guy. We'll have to see how it plays out, though, because you're right. Hollywood doesn't really they care about whether the guy's marketable and whether he's sort of likable. And you
don't want to Google someone's name, and that's the first thing that pops up when you're trying to have him entertaining your children.
So he's still in a precarious situation. We'll see where it plays out. I think he's doing everything in his power. He's got the right lawyers, it seems, behind him, and the narrative is sort of getting shifted away from the initial report. But we'll see how much he's able to sort of turn the bus around. Let's turn our attention to an oldie but a goodie, or an oldie but a interestingy. We'll say Tory Lanez. So take two on that. This is the Megan Thee Stallion shooting case. He has been convicted in that case, but remember, after his conviction, he lawyered up with a big name, Jose Baez, who is the guy who famously defended Casey Anthony, right? Yeah. And so he's a good lawyer. He gets people exonerated. Okay. Regardless of your feelings, he's a good lawyer.
Before we get going, obviously, he's a very good lawyer because look what he can do. But then, doesn't it work also in the other direction that when you see somebody has hired Jose Baez,
You're like, oh boy, they got a bad case against him.
yeah, that guy did it.
Yeah. You start to feel like, this is
dear.
a real Hail Mary. No, I completely agree. It's like when you lawyer up with the best of the best, you're sort of signaling that you've got the worst of the worst to deal with. Yes.
Okay.
And there are some bad facts for Tory, absolutely. So this appeal, he's asking for a new trial. And like all new trial motions, he's coming with the kitchen sink. What you do is you say, look, I've been convicted, but this trial was an absolute mess. There's all of these procedural errors which hurt my ability to present my case in a fair manner, and I couldn't get a fair shake in front of the jury. So what they're really zeroing in on here in this argument is that there's a picture that was shown of Tory Lanez shirtless, and he has a tattoo of an AK-47 on his chest. Now, Tory says using this is trying to inflame the jury against him. Basically, it's trying to present him as a guy who loves guns in a shooting case. And that's unfair. There's lots of pictures of me wearing shirts. If you just want to identify me as a person, you don't have to use the one of me shirtless with the gun tattoo.
First of all, I don't think everybody was in a swimsuit when this happened, by the way. So
Yes.
I don't think not having a shirt on is that crazy. Meg was in a bikini. Secondly, sir, you got a gun tattooed on your chest. That it was your decision. You loved something so much, you got it tattooed on your chest.
That's okay. That's why they wanted to present it to the jury, because of that feeling exactly. But that's not fair to Tory Lanez. The reason that's not fair to Tory Lanez is I could have a gun tattoo. It has no bearing on whether or not I'm guilty of shooting Megan Thee Stallion in the foot on a given date.
I guess it just represents your grandma. It made you think of your grandma, so you got a gun tattooed.
This is what we call character evidence. You can't have that. We try to convict people in the American justice system based on bad acts, not bad people.
I get it.
You're trying to paint him as a bad person who gets gun tattoos.
I'm not saying he's a bad
Tory's
person. We're acting like we used a photo of him from a Halloween costume in 2003. Sir, you went to the tattoo parlor, went through the book, and chose the gun. I'm not saying. Listen,
I love your perspective, because you're like what he is arguing shouldn't have happened, because people feel a certain way about gun tattoos.
I don't feel a certain way, but
case.
I don't feel a certain way, but he's acting like, man, I got set up, and I'm like, sir,
No. He's not saying it's unfair, like the prosecutors drew in a gun tattoo.
That's what I'm
He's
acting
not
like.
saying that. He's just saying you can't just dirty me up. He's also saying they threatened to put up his rap lyrics, while he was deciding whether or not he was going to testify in his own defense. And he says, the prosecutor said, look, if you get up on that stand, I'm going to bring up your rap songs about guns. I'm going to bring up your tattoo. You're going to open the door to me sort of dirtying you up in the eyes of the jury with nothing to do with whether I shot.
These are the time I need you to lawyer me. But are you not allowed to show parts of your character?
Very, very limited ability to show parts of people's character.
If I have a history of writing poetry about guns and then something like that's not relevant to the case?
No, because not in American criminal justice. Because so in some cases, there's a small exception where remember the Bill Cosby cases. You can set up someone's MO, like if their modus operandi is always to put a Mickey in a girl's drink and then sort of sexually assault her, and does that many, many times over, you can bring up past instances of the person putting a Mickey in someone's drink to prove a current instance. Okay. That's called an MO.
So if he had shot somebody else, I could say,
if he had a pattern of shooting at parties, you could bring that up. But you can't just bring up things that will make the jury think, oh, this guy just loves guns, so therefore he shot her on this instance. You can't do that. And that's what Jose Baez is arguing forcefully, because the temptation of the prosecution is to do exactly what you did. Because look at the effect it had on you. It's like, oh, Tory, what are you complaining about? You obviously love guns. It made you think differently about Tory rather than focusing on the evidence of whether he shot Tory or whether he shot Megan Thee Stallion that night.
Well, let's keep in mind, I'm not just going off of a tattoo. I'm going off of...
There's a lot of evidence.
I'm going off of a call from jail to which he said, I'm really sorry I did that.
Yes.
So that first tainted my brain.
Yeah, no, listen, he's got a mountain of evidence, and the whole point of Jose Baez's motion is to poke little holes so that the whole edifice starts to crumble, because they're saying if the prosecutors needed to show this shirtless photo, then what else have they lied? What else have they sort of gilded the lily and sort of tried to build up the case of Tory as a bad person because they have a weak case of Tory performing this bad act.
So what is the goal then of Jose? To
get him a new trial.
And then what would the other one would be a mistrial?
It'd be done. It'd be vacated. They would take that conviction, throw it out, and they'd bring everyone back to court. Now, when you get a new trial, sometimes the prosecutor says, I don't want to go through this again. Yeah. I'm not going to bring charges. My case is too weak. He's hoping that you get ordered a new trial, and then the prosecutor says, I don't have the goods. Tory's off the hook. But the prosecutor will have the option to say, all right, let's run it back. We'll do it without the shirtless photo, and we'll convict you again.
And there's no chance that they can say there's no option 3 of like, not only new trial, this stands, you're still guilty.
Well, the judge can look at this brief and say, no dice, conviction stands. This isn't good enough for me to overturn that result. That's the likely outcome, by the way. So these are Hail Marys. These are very hard to win. Jose Baez is a great lawyer, but most of these fail. Most of these efforts to overturn a conviction fail because all these middling sort of minor problems in a trial are very common. It's a number of days. There are little errors that don't amount to a problem with the overall process. So it's unlikely that he could win. This is a decent argument. He's got others. He says, sort of, remember that whole Kelsey 80-minute interview with cops where she sort of described Tory Lanez shooting? He's saying you playing that in front of the jury is really problematic because Kelsey recanted a lot of those statements. So now all you've played is her old interview when it first happened, and they don't get to hear her saying, no, that's not how I believe it happened now. So he's saying you sort of stack the deck. Kelsey actually would have been my witness, Tory thinks. Tory thinks that Kelsey was going to defend him. She gets up there, she pleads the fifth, and she's all hostile. You remember those moments?
Yeah.
And so they say, hey, we got a hostile witness. We need to hear from her. Can we play this interview? And they play this old interview, and he's saying, that old interview, a lot of it is not true, and Kelsey said it's not true.
But Kelsey didn't say that in court. She could have, and she didn't.
This is the problem. This is the problem Tory has, but he's just playing. This is the problem Jose Baez has. You can only play the deck you're sort of handed, the hand you're dealt. So he has to take the facts as they are, and he's trying to say playing this thing without her recanting is prejudicial. It's basically telling a story that is no longer fully true.
So Megan, if this goes through, Megan is going to have to go back to court and relive this and do this all over again.
Potentially. If he wins this motion and the prosecutors decide to try him again, there will be another trial.
If you were to guess, will he?
Not a chance. Okay. I don't think so. I think the conviction will stand. I think I think Jose Baez is very, very talented. This is a hard motion to win, and I don't see it happening, but stranger things have happened.
And do you
before.
think Tory's at laser away today? Just getting it.
If he has the time before the next trial, he's like, Dr. Tatoff, could you just buff this out?
Buddy got a group on.
Yeah, can we make this into a little bear, like a cute little stuffed animal? All right, that'll do it for us today. We'll see you guys next time.